Hello, this is Women of the Future. We are now at episode 20, where we will be looking at the subject entitled Patriarchal Women. I am here in the studio with Sister Denis, who has been sharing her amazing stance on what spirituality means, and she is offering us her valuable insight into understanding the human psyche and human behavior. Sister Denis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'm sure the audience is really looking forward to what you have to say today. Women have been born into various societies and communities depending where in the globe they take birth. Okay? Tell us what you mean by patriarchal woman. And I assume that the antonym of that is matriarchal woman. Tell us what patriarchal woman is, and I specifically want to know, do you see this type of women in a positive or negative light, or do you just see them as what they are without any judgment?
Well, let's look first of all at what the patriarchal society is. A patriarchal society is where the elite males of any particular society set the system, the moral and ethical system of that society, and they determine actually the role of women. And it's usually, in my view, biased in their favor and against women, children, animals, plants, stones and rocks. So you can see from that description that, to me, patriarchal society is out of balance. But most of the societies in this world are patriarchal, and it corresponds to the traditional religions, which are also patriarchal. And so the position of women is very much second class in a patriarchal society. Now, a patriarchal woman is a woman who receives certain favors from the patriarchal system in exchange for keeping the other women down. And so I have a problem with that. Let me describe a little bit how it works. There are some societies which are very much societies where the males have a dominant position, and yet a woman may become head of a corporation, prime minister, something like this. And if you look at these individuals, they take on a lot of the patriarchal values themselves. And one of the most telling signs is that during their period of office, their period of advantage, they have personal advantage themselves, wealth, position, etc. But they never do anything for other women. And so this is how I describe a patriarchal woman, as somebody who gets something from the patriarchal society in exchange for keeping all the other women in a more subservient mentality and position. And I think that it is deceptive, because sometimes people will say, well, look, you know, here are all these women in very powerful positions, so therefore it means that women have a better deal, but it doesn't actually happen that way. Then your other thing that you mentioned was that the antonym of a patriarchal society is a matriarchal society, and I don't think it's really that. To me, a matriarchal society would be where everything is biased towards the women and against the men, and I don't think that's any better. Means that you favor women, you disfavor men. And that is not what we are looking for, I think. What I'm interested in is complementarity, perhaps rather than parity, because men and women are, you know, brothers and sisters, but they are also very different from one another, you know. So the kind of future I'm looking at, maybe the males are enjoying dominance, but it's not at the expense of women, children, animals, plants and stones. But it is where the males may be more, you can say, trustees, and really care for and look to the advancement of, because it's not an adversarial relationship. See, patriarchal, matriarchal, you're still in the adversarial thing.
Okay.
A complementary relationship is where the masculine, feminine understands itself, and you have a beautiful whole, you see, which is also very much there in nature, in certain plants and animals and so on, where they're really complementary. And I think that our problem in the world today is this adversarial relationship.
Whether one is living in such a society where there is a patriarchal woman who's has some position of power. My next question to you is, how does a person living in that society, a woman or women living in that society, protect themselves from such a negative force, as it were?
Well, this is a challenge. You see, if a woman wants to come into power, political power, economic power, whatever, and she does a lot for women in the current patriarchal mode that we are in, the society gets destabilized, because its stability is based on a disparity. And I'm interested in parity. So where there is parity, everybody has to be themselves, everybody has to, you can't say, well, you know, I'm a man, so I have all these advantages, and therefore I don't have to have the necessary talents, level of responsibility, etc., etc. You know, there's no sinecure. So,
Sorry, there's no?
Sinecure. Sinecure means you have the position, don't do the work.
Okay.
And you get the pay.
Okay.
That's a sinecure.
Yeah.
So I think it means that everybody has to be a person. So your maleness and femaleness is secondary to your persondom, as it were, your personhood.
Yeah, that is very powerful, because a lot of women as well as men don't see it that way. Mainly because from the time you were old enough to understand, someone pointed a mirror and say, look, you're a little boy, you're a little girl. So they see themselves as in their gender first, before being a person.
And you see, a patriarchal woman will make sure that that continues. So a person, whether they're in a male or female body, but you're looking at the person who may have all kinds of combinations of masculine and feminine attributes, all kinds of talents and so on, but that the, you know, the idea of parity to me is where a person is seen with all of their qualities, all of their everything, their weaknesses and so on, and that they are encouraged to take the position that most suits them, you see, and that it's not defined or determined by their gender, but much more by their characteristics, their qualities of their spirit, you see, rather than any physical attributes.
If one has learnt these negative traits of seeing oneself as in one's gender first before seeing oneself as a person, and you know, one's getting these negative messages from patriarchal women in your particular society, how do you redress that internally? Because if I look at whatever you said in the series, you have to work on yourself on more than one level.
Yes.
Okay, so how do you make a paradigm shift as far as your own attitude is concerned, where you see yourself realistically and not superficially?
Well, you start using this word person more than man and woman, you see. And, you know, one of the problems is our language is gender biased.
Yes, it is. And that applies to every single language on the
yes.
planet.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I think that as the thinking of an individual, and by extension a community, as the thinking shifts, you start creating words that correspond to your thinking. You know, with technology, we have all these new items. So you have a mouse, because it has a little tail, but now you have trackpad, or you know, you find words to describe new things. And if you start thinking about people as a person predominantly, and then man or woman secondarily, so that you look at the person's needs, which may also be very much to do with their function as a mother or as a father or whatever, because the new generation is going to inherit their legacy. So the new generation receives new information because the adult persons start thinking of themselves as persons more than males and females. The children will also receive that message, and we have to be very creative here. We have to create new stories. We have to create so many things where you apply parity, and you're not saying women have to become masculine or men have to become feminine, but a woman is a person with her own configuration of characteristics. A man is, you know, and this allows for all of the different degrees of masculinity and femininity and combinations thereof to be there in their own right, you see, because otherwise we say if you're a really feminine woman, that's good. If you're a really masculine man, that's good. If you're somewhere in between, that's unnatural. Excuse me? You're a person, you see. Mm. And so it gives you a lot more rights to be what you are, because you're a person, not a physical body, do you see? Mm. And you are actually a person. You have a physical body. And I think it gives you much more in terms of enjoying your rights as a person, and much more freedom to develop yourself with, you know, maybe sometimes a person will say, well, you know, being an airline pilot is a male job. But a very feminine woman can be a very good airline pilot, you see. So that these sort of gender-biased activities for earning your living will start losing their gender bias.
You spoke of language being gender-specific. How does God fit into the picture? Because he does not have a gender. That sounds like as if I'm saying he does not have an agenda. I think he does have an agenda, but he does not have a gender.
That's right.
So, and specifically as far as patriarchal woman is concerned, tie that up for us, please.
You know, the patriarchal society has arisen from patriarchal religions. The founders of religions are historically men. Jesus Christ, Moses, Buddha, etc. You know, Muhammad. These are men, you see. And so if God's message is carried through men, it means the men are somehow specially having something ahead of women, so that otherwise it would be equally distributed. But, you know, the patriarchal religions can exist in a patriarchal society if you have a religious or a religion which is having a woman as the head of it, and there have been, they get sort of deleted from the historical record, you see.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So they were influential women, but somebody many centuries ago made sure no one knows anything about it.
Well, it is said that there have been female popes, but if you look into the historical record, there's no sign. You know, you look into some hidden away documents and you find there are references. So the religious scriptures are very patriarchal, and the system of the society follows the lead of the scriptures. And I think that God is genderless, just as a soul is genderless. A God is discarnate, doesn't have a body, so how you call God a man, I don't know. But you have representations of God with a long beard. That's masculine. People find it more comfortable to call God a he.
Yeah.
Once you say God is a she, you don't have any image, you see. But the he image for God comes easily, because in the history of art, you have God represented artistically as a man, you see. And especially in Western culture, it's very, very masculine. In India, you have goddesses, but in other religions, I mean, in Catholicism, you have Mary, who is called Mother of God, which is an interesting idea, but still God is a boy.
Yes.
You know. Yeah. But to actually think of discarnate God, the supreme light, the supreme creator, as a non-male is very confusing for people. So I think that when you have parity in the right of women to pursue a spiritual life, that is also shifting things. So in the Brahma kumaris, which is what I belong to, you know, the head of the Brahma kumaris, according to the constitution, must always be a woman, can never be a man. That's an interesting thing. And you know, the founder of the Brahma kumaris, Brahma Baba, always kept women in front and enabled women to have a position of religious authority, you see. And that's something new.
The women that you're referring to within the Brahma kumaris who are in positions of power, they grew up in patriarchal society, and yet they're heads of a spiritual movement. How does that work? How do they, well, renounce their patriarchy and do this properly, where they're benefiting women and not otherwise?
I think actually there are several who are patriarchal in their nature. But I think that as the movement progresses, that need for the patriarchal characteristics will probably shift. Because to operate a women's organization, which is not really a women's organization, but it's predominantly women in positions of power. But I think a very interesting characteristic of it is that there isn't just a woman. There are several women who share power. So the idea of shared power among women is something new as well. And that is kind of interesting, that you can share power, still maintain unity, still take care of everybody, still pursue your own private, personal, spiritual aims, and still keep a whole organization moving along. It's really actually, I don't think it's really an organization. It works better to me as a movement, as a community.
Okay, Sister Denis, we've run out of time. This has been a very interesting subject because it's not something that one hears every day. I speak on behalf of myself as well as the viewer. There is a young lady, or not so young lady, listening to you right now from somewhere on the planet who needs to hear your final words on not how to be a patriarchal woman, but how to deal with the adverse influence of being in a society where there are patriarchal women. What do you have to say to her or them?
I say, think of your person, because there's no point in being antagonistic or having an adversarial relationship with patriarchal women or patriarchal men, but look at your person and define that to yourself, raise yourself up and look at yourself in all of your beauty and let yourself move forward.
let yourself move forward. That's a beautiful note on which to end. So there you have it. Sister Denis has given us some, well, for want of a better expression, a toy to chew on as far as this subject is concerned. So use what was shared in today's episode as a mirror and look into your life and ask yourself, where do you stand on this issue? Are you treated in such a way by a woman that Sister Denis has defined? If so, how are you looking after yourself in such a scenario? Or more importantly, are you a patriarchal woman? And if so, how does it serve you to be that way? I think that is the deepest message that I got from today's show, is whatever it is that you're doing, how does it best serve you? So thank you, Sister Denis, and thank you for joining us. And we will see you again for the next episode. I do wish you Godspeed in your own spiritual journey.